Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. May is the month of Miike, where I'll be covering films from the legendary Japanese director Takashi Miike. In this episode, I'll be going over the 2003 Japanese horror movie classic, One Missed Call, Chakushin Ari. The film tells the story of a mysterious curse where people receive a phone call from their future selves and hear the moment right before their death. I'll be going over the events that take place throughout the film, while our scare score goes up or down based on how effective the scares are or attempt to be. One Missed Call is one of the only horror films where you don't actually want signal, but how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore One Missed Call and tally up the scare score. Our movie begins with an intro similar to Ringu's Zero Birthday, but this time it actually makes sense. We meet our main character Yumi, who's having a hot pot dinner with a group of friends. They discuss her apparent fear of peepholes, and we see a flashback showing a possible trauma she may have had with them. As they talk about a friend who had a possible ghost encounter, a ghostly white arm can be seen resting on Yumi's shoulder. The way the ghostly arm was just resting on her shoulder was very creepy. This scare scene gave me a pretty good idea on how the rest of the scares might be set up and left a smile on my face. We meet her friend named Yoko, who just attended the funeral of a girl who drowned. We're shown glimpses of her dead friend in brief but disturbing images. Yoko receives a call on her cell phone from an ominous sounding ringtone that she says isn't hers. The call is from her own number, and the voicemail left is dated April 18th, 11:04 p.m., which is 2 days later. While they listen to the voicemail, an unknown person watches them from a stall. She hears her own voice followed by a horrified scream. This is a very creepy scene that does a great job in setting up the mysterious curse. The ringtone is haunting and the concept is actually quite clever. The rest of the group believe it to be a prank. They all exchange phone numbers and unknowingly sign their own death warrants. Yumi and her friends are taking a college lecture on child abuse, but Yoko has more important things on her mind. Boys specifically. However, the lecture is actually important and foreshadows later events. Yumi experiences another Vietnam flashback about someone cutting their toenails a little too deep. Later that night, she gets a call from Yoko, aka the curse's first victim. At exactly 11:04 p.m., just like the voicemail, Yoko screams in terror and is thrown off the bridge right onto an oncoming train. Yoko's death is only scary because she is the first victim of the curse. It's a little cheesy, which is something that the later deaths also fall victim to. Her severed arm somehow still manages to dial on her cell phone, ensuring that her final TikTok post goes live even in death. Just kidding, she dials the number of the curse's next victim. Yumi attends Yoko's funeral, which is also being attended by a bunch of crying Japanese girls. I haven't seen that many since... While going through Yoko's things, Yumi runs into a mysterious man in her room. Two girls describe the horrible scene of Yoko's death, and their description sounds way more horrifying than what we actually saw.
殺されたんだよ。陽子先輩も。
They talk of a woman who died full of hate who kills you through the phone. She then goes through her victim's contacts and dials her next victim. Well, joke's on her, I haven't been able to pay my phone bill in months. The mysterious man has been following Yumi and overhears the entire conversation. Yumi tells Kenji about Yoko's death and he shows her that he also received the mysterious phone call. That's kind of a weird face he made. He doesn't believe in the curse and walks off with a too cool for school attitude. However, being too cool for school can't save you from having 2 minutes left to live. The elevator opens up and Kenji is pulled into the elevator shaft and falls to his death right in front of Yumi. Kenji's death scene is cheesier than Yoko's and not scary. As he lies on the ground bleeding, a candy falls out of his mouth and the next victim is dialed from his cell phone. Yumi is questioned by the police as a witness and tries telling them about the curse. They obviously don't believe her and she Kenji just sounds crazy. Natsumi is the next victim to the curse. She checks her phone to see that she's received the titular one missed call 2 days from now. She receives a photo with her face and a ghostly arm behind her. A bunch of her friends learn that she's received the call and remove their contacts from her phone, sort of like my Facebook friends list over the years. They cancel her phone plan, which is a little too late considering she's already received the call. News of the phone call reaches a television crew and they harass Natsumi about it. The host hands her another cell phone, which eerily receives a call from Natsumi. They see the same photo, but now the ghostly woman is much more visible. The TV host realizes that she is in some real deep shit and says that he knows a medium that can perform an exorcism. Yumi tells them to leave her alone, but Natsumi wants to go with them. Yumi once again sees the mysterious man named Yamashita, who reveals more information about the curse. He shows her a burnt cell phone that belonged to his late sister. His sister received the call and died in a fire 3 days later. While investigating the curse, they see an ad showing that Natsumi's exorcism will be televised for the world to see. She hears the noise of an inhaler at the hospital, which is the same noise she heard before Kenji's death. And just in case we didn't hear it enough, the nurse kindly presses on it 2 more times for dramatic effect. They go to the medical examiner and look for patients who passed away from asthma attacks. They learn of a 10-year-old girl named Mimiko Mizunuma who died of an asthma attack, and her mother Marie disappeared soon after. Yamashita's sister worked at the children's clinic where Mimiko and her younger sister Nanako were patients. While Mimiko attended the clinic for asthma attacks, Nanako had numerous injuries and was possibly being abused. They believe the mother was experiencing Munchausen syndrome and purposely injuring Nanako so she could gain attention. She supposedly stood by and did nothing when Mimiko experienced the asthma attack that took her life. They try getting the police involved, but the cops can't investigate a crime that hasn't happened yet. The time has come for Natsumi's televised appearance, and the entire world is watching. As the program goes on, Natsumi becomes even more terrified about her impending doom, but the TV hosts and guests don't really seem to care. A shaman comes out and performs an exorcism on Natsumi. As we all probably guessed, the exorcism is a sham and does nothing to save her life. She hears the ominous ringtone and her old phone magically appears in her hand. The shaman is blown away by an unknown force and the ghostly white woman appears from behind the wall. Yumi sees the ghost on the camera and tries to save her friend. Natsumi is brutally killed as her body begins to twist and her head comes clean off. Natsumi's death was completely over the top and sort of lost the scare factor that it built up. While still effective, everything involving the picture and the ghost slowly getting closer each time was way scarier than the final product. Although, I will add some points because Natsumi was essentially killed on live television. Her imminent death was advertised for all to see and no one could do anything to stop it, and that's terrifying in its own right. Like all the previous victims, an orange Dragon Ball falls out of her mouth and rolls right in front of Yumi. She suddenly receives the ringtone of death on her cell phone. Her voicemail dated 2 days from now plays the sound of her voice eerily asking, "Why?" Yamashita snaps her phone in half and tosses it in the fish tank. Maybe that'll do the trick. He then asks her to call her friends for some reason. With what phone? And why wouldn't you want to delete the contacts? He realizes how dumb that was and goes straight for the alcohol. This is where we learn about Yumi's childhood trauma and abuse at the hands of her mother. Yumi's grandmother hung herself, which Yumi witnessed through a peephole, explaining her phobia. As if witnessing your dead grandma's corpse wasn't enough, her mother gave her numerous cigarette burns. Child abuse has been a common theme throughout the film, is an unfortunate evil that exists beyond horror movies. They go to the Mizunuma apartment hoping to find clues as to what happened. As they search the apartment, we get a fake-out jump scare involving crows hitting the window, which is never a good sign. Yumi looks at a child's drawing and doesn't notice the cabinet above her slightly moving. She finds a creepy torn picture of the family with Mimiko's face missing. Yamashita finds Mimiko's inhaler and a ghostly woman appears in the cabinet behind Yumi. This moment is totally creepy and textbook Japanese horror. Yamashita looks inside the cabinet and finds an old camcorder with no tape. He locates Nanako at a nursery, but she doesn't talk and can't tell him anything. However, her teddy bear plays the same tune as the deathly ringtone that the caretaker says is from a child's TV show. Yumi learns that there is an old rundown hospital that Marie would frequently visit. She decides to visit the hospital despite Yamashita telling her to stay home. She goes to the abandoned hospital where nothing bad ever happens. She arrives at the hospital and hears Yamashita's ringtone coming from inside. She finds a light box and is surprisingly able to turn on all the lights. However, no amount of light can protect you from ghosts. Asian female ghosts with long black hair to be exact. We get this really generic scene where she starts to hear the ringtone all around her and briefly sees Yamashita walking away. It's super generic and almost a little silly, especially because she still believes that it's him roaming around the hospital. She peeks behind the curtain and sees her cell phone covered in maggots while receiving a call from herself. The lights suddenly go out and long black hair slowly descends from the ceiling. Marie's ghost slowly and creepily approaches her from behind in complete silence. This moment sent chills down my spine, which is also currently in a lot of pain. Marie chases Yumi around the hospital in the film's most intense sequence up to this point. Marie's ghost rivals even Kayako and Sadako in my opinion. Yumi scrambles for a place to hide and would definitely lose 10 out of 10 games if she played hide and seek. She is now being stalked by Mimiko's ghost, who pushes around a glass container holding a fetus. The container appears in her hands and she freaks out before being rescued by Yamashita. They try to escape the hospital but find themselves locked in. The ghost presses its face against the metal door, which I actually found to be funny rather than scary. They retreat into another room and Yamashita arms himself with an axe. They once again hear the ringtone, but this time it's a text message telling Yumi she's going to die in less than 1 minute. Feeling all hope is lost, they both begin to freak out until Yamashita sees Marie's decomposing corpse holding another cell phone. This is Marie's cell phone and the original phone that started the chain of phone calls of the curse. He grabs the phone and cancels the call, which seems to save Yumi's life. Yamashita breathes a sigh of relief and tells Yumi that it's over. But is it? Yumi believes that Marie was dialing phone numbers so that she could be found. Marie's body suddenly comes back to life in a pretty effective jump scare. Yamashita pulls Yumi back and swings at Marie with the axe, which seems to have little effect.
You should have gone for the head.
He is visited by his sister's ghost, who cryptically tells him that there is a separate sky for each of us and disappears. Marie corners Yumi and takes the form of her abusive mother. She wraps her hands around Yumi's neck as she prepares to wrangle it. However, Yumi, seeing her own mother, says that she is going to be a good girl and stay with her. She embraces Marie and begins to sob, which also makes Marie shed a tear. Yamashita barges in and now sees Yumi holding Marie's decomposed body, no longer animated. This was a pretty creepy scene with all sorts of weird things going on. The makeup for Marie's corpse was pretty impressive and made her look terrifying. With the curse now seemingly over, the police arrive and retrieve Marie's body along with her cell phone, which had all of the phone numbers of the curse's victims. The police take Yumi home and Yamashita is called to Nanako's daycare. They give him the missing tape from the camcorder and we finally see the truth behind the curse's origin. Mimiko was the culprit behind Nanako's injuries. She would purposely injure her sister and promised that she would be taken to the hospital. Marie walked in on one of these assaults and realized that Mimiko was deranged. When caught in the act, Mimiko experienced an asthma attack. Marie grabbed Nanako and rushed her to the hospital and left Mimiko to die. This turned Mimiko into a vengeful spirit and she killed Marie soon after, hence her disappearance. Mimiko went on to kill several more people, and I believe that the phone calls were meant as warnings to the victims from Marie. Yamashita realizes that the curse isn't over and that Mimiko's spirit is still at large. And by at large, I mean lurking behind people taking showers. Yumi's clock starts rewinding itself as Yamashita knocks on her door. Yumi runs back inside and finds Mimiko already sitting on her couch. The clock is rewinded back to Yumi's predicted time of death as she says exactly what was heard on the voicemail.
どうして
Mimiko mocks her while approaching her. Help me out here, Patrick. And Yumi lets out a scream of terror. Yamashita runs inside her apartment and finds Yumi casually sitting on the casting couch as if nothing happened. The pair embrace, but it's not your usual hug. The usual hug doesn't involve a large kitchen knife inside your stomach. The mirror's reflection shows that Yumi is now possessed by Mimiko. Just like she did to Nanako, she tells him that she will take him to the hospital.
連れてってあげる
In a dream sequence, Yamashita walks into Mimiko's apartment and saves her from death by giving her the inhaler. I interpret this as being Mimiko's dream. As her mother refused to save her life, she possibly wishes that her father could have done so and views Yamashita as her father figure in this moment. As evil as Mimiko may be, I still find her to be a sympathetic villain as I don't believe she should have been left to die. Yamashita wakes up in the hospital having survived the stab wound. In the film's final scene, a possessed Yumi watches over him holding a knife behind her back. Mimiko has replaced Nanako with Yamashita as her victim and places a candy into his mouth. Having accepted his fate, he chews on the candy as the possessed Yumi smiles deviously as the movie ends. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was One Missed Call. My friends, this is a great film in the Japanese horror genre and is often overlooked in favor of Ringu and Ju-on. While not as good or iconic as these films, Chakushin Ari is a classic in its own right. While it does borrow a lot of its ideas and scares from other J-horror films, the execution was still very effective, earning One Missed Call a good scare score of 60%. The scariest scene in the film is when Yumi is being stalked in the hospital by Marie's ghost. There is just something about ghostly Asian women with long black hair silently lurking about that will never cease to turn my dreams into nightmares. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the Horror Mine. Y'all stick around.